then whatever presentation you want to do and share screen.
Awesome, thanks, sir.
Yep.
You got it.
Bye. Hey, Colleen.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Your us, that's more important.
What
Yes.
did you? Yeah, I see it.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now, but it breaks up every once in a while.
Yeah, our internet was just choppy here for a second. I don't know.
Okay.
This weather we're having here.
Okay. Yeah, was there a hiccup in the internet? Because I was on the struggle bus over here, so.
Yeah, we're gonna
Fine.
attribute it to that.
All right, sounds good. That works for me. All right, welcome to budget meet work session. So the first thing is the budget presentation, first look. Take it away, Tim.
All right, so here's a review of our agenda, just to review the focus of budgeting, our overall process, some preliminary numbers in our first draft, and then looking ahead for the duration of our budgeting experience. So let's make sure this is okay. So the focus of our budgeting this year, we're moving expeditiously towards finalizing our strategic plan for the board's consideration for July. And we're presently working on compiling goals with our shareholders around academic excellence, innovation, and well-being. So that will be an underpinning of all of the expenditures of the district. The board and superintendent goals, both the board and I have generated goals for this year, which will undoubtedly carry over into next year when you consider that some of those goals, students first and foremost, for example, are as much an ethos for the board as the strategic plan is itself. Continuation of our community schools program, maintaining the programs that we have, continuing to expand on our department leadership and planning with our instructional leaders, and as always, seeking efficiencies when it is possible in the maintenance of our programs and experiences for our students. So those are the focus areas that we're embedding into our budgeting process. And then the process itself is an iterative process. We revise all of our revenue and expense information as they come in over the course of the budgeting season. We identify and prioritize our desired budget items, and we change those according to the goals. And we make strategic changes to the budget based on priorities and available funding. So our first draft highlights, I will turn it over to my compatriot, the man with the abacus and the calculator, Mr. Dana Wood. And he can give us a sense of our initial read on first draft and dig a little deep into some of the documents that are creating these figures for us.
So you start with right now, the first look in terms of the total budgets. See that's 21,730,429. That's a 3.91% increase. If you want to look line by line as to how that is comprised, that is what that's the budget projection document. It's the 11-page documents that you have in board docs. And you'll see that when you go through this spreadsheet, it is literally every of our account codes. One thing I'll highlight, when you look at it, they have in the third column components. The budgets are made up of 3 components: administrative, program, and capital. Typically, that's how we break out the budgets. That's how we report it. And you'll see that the items, it will tell you what it is: administrative, program, and capital. Administrative is just that. It's the administrative components of it, the salaries of administrators, things like that, the running of the day-to-day of the districts. The capital is more facilities. Our debt service is there, transportation, not transportation, maintenance and custodial. You think of capital, you think of the infrastructure. And then the programming is, that's how it impacts the students. That's really where any good budgets, that's where it's going to lie, you know. And one of the documents I provide you in major categories is a breakdown of that. And our budgets typically, the program components are about 80% of the expense. And that's where you want it to be. You want the money to be where it's going to have the most direct impact on the students' learning, and that's what that is in terms of programming. So, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at the entire document, 11-page document. If you have any specific questions on any of the line items, because I don't think you want to hear me go through line by line. You'll see last year's number projected this year, the difference percentage wise, as well as the dollar amounts in terms of that. A couple times you'll see, particularly with salaries, you'll go, oh my goodness, why is it? I'll use mine as an example. Why is it a 13% increase? I'm not getting a 13.8% increase in my salary. What happened was after the budget cycle last year, my salary changed after the fact, and it's being absorbed somewhere else within the budget this year to make up for that. But to show a true correlation as to for that line item, because I take this, once the voters approve it, I plug it into our system, and that's how we keep track of it throughout the year. So it shows a large increase, but that line item technically from last year to the coming year is 3.5% in reality in terms of that. But you'll see that where, you know, try and give you the most correct number in that line as if it was an already approved budget.
What's the big increase, David, in professional development? It's like 52% increase. That's right.
You have to look at the base to appreciate that a little bit, Colleen. All right, so if I go to ED, so we went from 78,000 to 119. So with the almost $22 million, it's a market increase percentage wise, but in the scheme of things, I believe that it's on par with the values that we're putting forth with the district.
Is that a pretty hefty increase though, comparison to other years? In the 21-22 year, could it have been like 70 grand? And then all of a sudden we're doing a $42,000 bump next year. I mean, is it more substantial in the upcoming year than it has been?
When you look at this number, yes, but part of that is around this time last year, Tim started talking about wanting to have department leaders and giving them a stipend of about $2,000. And I think there's 15 department leaders. 14 department leaders. So that's $28,000 right there. Well, that was not calculated necessarily in the numbers from last year because they don't technically, if you look at the budgets, there is a section, curriculum development, where a lot of this is coming from. The stipend for the department leaders comes out of a different line. So that $28,000 to pay for those department leaders is factored into that. Plus there is, you'll see that there was a request at the elementary level to increase their curriculum development, their professional developments. It went from 5,300 to a little over 10,000, kind of keeping it on par with both buildings and staffing. So there is an increase in an elementary line for that at this moment in time, plus the department chairs, and that really is why that makes up that sizable increase, is because of that. Even though this current budget is paying for the department chairs, at the time of building this last year, that was still in a conversation mode, and the money was in there, but we did market into professional development because they hadn't been actually put in place yet. And that's why, and it goes back to my original thing, that's why where you see some changes like this, oh my goodness, at 52%, it's not necessarily a 52% increase in actual expenditures. It's now just showing it in the budgets as a whole, and that's why it represents an increase, but it's in the current budget as well. But it's kind of showing apples to apples, as opposed to it was in 3 different places last year. But I actually, looking at that, last year, we budgeted about $78,000 for professional development, but all said and done, I think when I looked at it, we spent well over 100,000 on professional development. When we look at it out, because BOCES, there's a BOCES component in there as well. So doing a lot of programming through BOCES, again, isn't necessarily on a budget line, but through offerings and approvals from the administrators and the superintendents on various programs, it ends up being paid for in other areas. So that is what's budgeted, but in the end, I think it comes down to is if we feel it's very important, we find the money so that the staff can go to whatever conference or workshop they want to attend.
And would it be hard or complicated to add another column that says like 2022-23 is such and such, but then you can have another column that says actually what you spent, and then that would show that in actually 2022-23 it was more than 78,000. It was actually 102,000. So that softens the budget difference for the following year. Is it hard to do that, or is it?
It won't be hard. Typically, what you see is on my monthly reports.
Okay.
In those documents I've been providing you, the ST3, you'll see, that month to month up-to-date expenses as well.
That's true.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
But yes, I mean, it could drill back and down and say, okay, generally speaking with this, for these building of the documents, I have it in an Excel sheets, and that way I can manipulate the numbers. But then once the budget is approved, I put it into our system, which is called Envision, and that's where we work out of. So when I give you reports, I'm taking it right from what we're using to track everything, whereas these documents are my kind of like my working documents.
Got it.
But I could easily give you any information you want in terms of expenses if you want.
It's available, so that's just.
And on the PD side, just to contextualize, I do think it's important. That is a reflection of the goals that we are putting in place. So really, we have new equipment in the form of technology that's been rolled out over a 5-year cycle of staff. Anytime you give a staff member new equipment, you want to make sure they have ample development so that they can utilize it. We have new standards that were implemented across the state. So there's a new target that we have to hit, and we have to make sure to do so with fidelity. We have new staff. 60% of our staff have 10 years or less in the field of education. So ensuring that they have best practices. And then we have new goals, and that is developing through the strategic planning process. So that's a market jump comparatively, but I think reflective of the efforts that we're putting their way.
I think too, it's important to remember that if you don't invest in the professional development, then you gotta hire more people. And I think that's one of the things that we've been looking at as we streamline things, is that it's not enough to absorb positions and to rearrange your schedule and, to bring that student teacher ratio back into alignment. But that means that those teachers that are still here need to have the support, and that comes in the form of professional development.
I wasn't questioning because I doubted it. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think we need to do it, and I support it completely.
Yeah.
I'll make that.
Oh, I wasn't,
Yeah, no,
I wasn't saying that.
That was not the interpretation.
That was mostly just a
Okay.
comment.
And one thing, Ron, what I can do, because I think at our next meeting, I'll do my budget thing. I can easily line it up with these categories as well. So you can see, here's what we've spent already for professional development, for technology. Because right now I show you as it's called materials and supplies and BOCES type of deal. But I could easily mirror these lines in the monthly presentation. So you can see it's, because I also give you the charts. of that breakdown. I can change it and make it these so that you're seeing that from month to month as well. You know, that's
It's just information.
it's not a problem. It really isn't.
Okay, great.
To get that. I don't know if you want to continue in this area a little bit in
I
terms of.
have a newbie request. Could we go back to the budget projection?
Absolutely.
I would find it helpful if you could take like one category. I've got one on my screen here, between pages 7 and 8. The monies, the line items for health.
Yep.
Could you just describe line by line what each of those items represent?
Sure. I don't know if everyone's there, if you want to follow along, or if we can pull it up in the board doc so everyone can see it.
Which document are you in?
It is in the budget projection.
Starting on page 7, Dana?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, at the bottom of page 7.
okay.
Is that the proposed budget?
Yes.
So the line I'm looking at is health, non-instructional salary as.
Question.
It's waiting for, and that way everyone can see it. Right there.
Here?
Yep, yes. So the first line actually is the salaries for our nurses, one in each building. So that's what that line represents. It's their salaries. They're considered non-instructional. We have two there. And then the second line is in case we have any substitutes for them, that it gets coded. So if someone comes in, if we have a sub nurse and we pay them, it comes out of that line item.
Okay.
Same thing with the next one, which is substitute for high school. Summer school salary is just that. It's, you know, for summer school, whether it's the extended school year, summer school, we are required to have a nurse on staff. And that's where that, you know, how we pay for that. Equipment is any purchases that we make that, you know, for materials. A couple years ago, we purchased AEDs. So it goes back to if the nurses are looking for something, if it's deemed equipment, it would come out of that line. Contractual, that would be anything that we, sometimes we contract with AMC, the Adirondack Medical Center, for physicals. We also, I would say we also contract with them for athletic training, but that comes out of the athletic area. But we would pull there the 15,000. That would be for our school physicals, generally speaking. And then materials is just that, supplies and materials, you know, Band-Aids, things like that. But again, we look at the nurses, they determine their needs, they submit a requisition, and then if it's a materials, it comes out of that code.
Yeah.
All of these things, and this is it's actually a great question, because what it does is they're coded in a way because at the end of the year, this gets all rolled up into, they call it an ST3 at the state level. And I have to submit it to the states, and they want it based off of certain codes. So these codes are by design years ago. So, you know, before me, Leonard Sowers, or before him, Jim Cordial didn't just make up these codes. The state says, here's how you have to code your expenditures. If it's health, if it's athletics, if it's curriculum, you got to use these codes because they link to a state report that we provide every year, which is then used as the basis for some of our state aid.
Thank you.
Yep.
Want to hit the levy a little bit?
Sure. Any other questions on the budget or major components? I even provided, you have a document in terms of the breakdown, you know, 80% is programming, 12% is capital, 7.4% is administrative at this moment in time. So the tax levy, you can see here right now, I'm projecting it to be 17,138,311. That's a 2.77% increase over last year. Actually, last year was a slight negative, if you remember going through this. So it was a slight negative. There are two documents in board docs that outline how I get that number. The first one has the property tax levy cap. It says first draft on it. And the states has a formula. And it says, here's the formula you need to follow to determine what your tax levy is going to be. Karen has it up on the screen. And basically it starts off with what was last year's tax levy. Then there's a growth factor, which we get. It's based off of, each school district gets it. I can honestly tell you, I don't know how the county, the state determines that growth factor. It has changed every year since I've been in this position. It was, so I honestly don't know how they determine it. My best guess is the fact that they look at the economic growth within a district. And the greater the growth in the districts, the greater the growth factor rate, because in terms of, businesses, jobs, and things like that. That's my best guess in terms of understanding how that formula, that number comes up. And then you throw in, we got a pilot. Ron brought that up a couple meetings ago and asking about that. It was last meeting. We have exemptions. And when you look at it, the prior year exemptions, I provided you a second page, looks like a little spreadsheet. And basically that shows you our debt service, what we paid currently for debts, what we're projecting to pay next year for the debt. So when the state decided to cap the levy at 2%, the tax cap at 2%, they built in exclusions. Basically, at the heart of it is debt service. So when a school district has debts, they can add it to this and use it as exclusions to then increase your tax levy. So even though the tax cap is at 2%, right now, what I'm saying is we're projecting about a 2.77 is because we can, in essence, write off our debts to increase that levy. When you really look at it, it almost goes hand in hand. The exclusion, so the add-on covers a good portion of what that debt is. So it's not like, oh, we got more money because of this. It's really helping offset what you're actually paying in debt, is what it comes down to. So that second sheet was the spreadsheet. It shows you what we are projecting to pay, what we paid this year, what we're projecting to pay last year minus building aid, and that's that number you'll see there, 429,770. That's what we're projected to get for state aid, for building aid. So you pay, you factor that in and you take that out because it's money coming from the states based off of our debts. So when we have debts and we run like our capital projects, we get building aid on our improvements. So whatever building aid we get, we can then, we have to take it away from the exclusion. So they're not giving us free money twice, as well as our bus leases. And that one is still kind of a slight unknown because, well, we haven't even gotten our buses this year yet. What the voters approved back in May of last year, typically we get them in the summertime. That's usually when the switchover happens. And last time I talked to Nikki Corson, we might have them in March for the CHU, but we obviously have to plan for purchases for next year because we have, we're on a lease and we have 2 buses coming up. They're going to go away, whether we have buses or not. They go away.
Can I ask you a question, Dan, on
Sure.
the buses? Is there an analysis between the difference between leasing a bus and purchasing a bus? I'm sure there is. And
It's a good question, and I didn't have a great answer until today
okay, great.
because I knew you were going to ask that question. Not really. I'm not that smart. I was actually talking to a superintendent at our health consortium meeting, and we were talking about fund balances and so on and so forth. And he was telling me how, they have a good fund balance and they can put money into a bus reserve. And I'm like, that's what I said. And I'm like, wow, why do, basically they purchase, we lease. And I'm like, well, I don't know why we lease because that's what we've been doing. But here's what it comes down to. If your school district gets a lot of state aid, that bus purchase is reimbursed. So this district, their reimbursement rate is at 86%.
Wow.
He told me that they actually make a little money on their bus purchases. So he can buy a bus for $160,000. He says he trades them out every 5 years. He swaps them out. And between the reimbursement and all that, and then selling them at the end of 5 years because they're owned, he says the last few times they actually make a little money off of it. For us, that reimbursement is like 36%. So we don't get the same reimbursement rate. We don't have the same reimbursement rate of other districts up in our area. So therefore, we would not be so fortunate enough to make a little money off it or possibly even break even. Because when you buy a vehicle, it doesn't really matter. The value of it goes down no matter what.
So did this person, the superintendent you were speaking with, tell you they purchased it 160, run it for 5 years, what do they sell it for?
He didn't really say what they sell it for, whatever the market is,
Yeah.
but if they're getting 86%
I
back on
understand
that
part.
160.
I'm going beyond that. I'm just saying, have we done an analysis between what we could sell it for up to 5 years and we paid for it versus the lease payments?
My guess is he's probably selling them for about, $80,000-$90,000.
We have a transportation study that was done
Oh, okay. there we
about
go.
5 years ago.
Many years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I could look into that and see.
I'm interested in that.
But the deciding factor is honestly whether or not you have a really good wash bay. Because it's the undercarriage and the
Because it's salt.
salination.
Destroyed.
So the districts that purchase and have strong wash bays maintain high value and equity in their buses.
On resale.
Who loves these old buses?
That
There's
makes a lot of
market out
sense.
there.
Just makes a lot of sense.
Or if they're really old, they go to land.
But it'll destroy it for the.
Yeah, the only part that erodes is from the bottom.
It's a Partridge family.
No, I.
But really, I think what it comes down to is districts that get a good state aid reimbursements is more advantageous for them
Yeah.
to purchase than for districts like us, where we probably would not, after 5 years, it's,
Do we get any state aid for the leases?
we get that through this exclusion.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Yes, so what we pay every year for our lease payments, we're able to
They get the 30.
factor into this exclusion. So we are getting an additional bump in our tax levy because of our lease payments.
Okay.
Yes.
David, do we expect any kind of additional state aid based on these maybe 20-some new students that we're getting in? Is that going to change the picture of our district perhaps?
We could receive more Title III for those students.
Right.
So it just depends how it's coded and things like that.
But in terms of like this current, like generally speaking, for this purpose and the budget purpose,
Right.
title funds aren't factored in because those are federal programs. They are administered separately. We keep them actually in a separate accounts. Title I, Title II, Title IV. We have used Title III. Well, we're eligible for some Title III, but when we looked at it a couple of years prior to this influx, we had like $10,000 in Title III, but you got to join other schools to tap into a consortium, and then you split it according to your needs. So when Laura Coffin, our title coordinator, did the analysis, that $10,000 that was earmarked for us, we were only going to get like $600 of it. Because at that time, we had like one student. So other districts that we would join this consortium with were going to benefit from our funds more so than we were. And
And it'd be schools in our catchment. It'd be like Woodbridge School, St. Agnes, and Northwood if they offer food funds. Not the sort of remuneration to cover the position outright, regrettably. That's just a direct hit to our budget.
Dana, to go back to the buses, have you put in the works of the mandate from last year's budget of going electric for our buses?
thought about it.
Wasn't there a 5-year?
2027 is when you had to have a portion of your fleets. The dilemma that it's hard to wrap around is the fact that one electric bus is like 2 of our current buses.
Can I say one thing?
Yes,
Dan used the term mandate. Is it mandated or highly recommended?
it's been mandated. The governor in the last year's budget said, yes.
Unfunded mandates.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can
going
speak
to
to
send
that,
more money
though.
our way.
There's, we're required by the end of the year to report any impediments to, the electrification of our fleet. And I can't wait to sit down and just dig into that, so.
right,
There are
because,
numerous, there aren't even charging stations that would be
It's gonna be
sufficient,
below zero.
so.
right, and
Yeah,
there's
that's
been federal grants that have come out about this, and it kind of goes back to your question, Ron, between lease and purchase. And the grants that I saw that have come out is, oh, if you trade in one of your old buses for a new electric bus, it has to be a purchase. Well, we don't have any old buses. All of our buses are leased, and we, you know, they go.
We have a couple of.
Yeah,
Every
they-
dresser is 70% or more.
And it's also, you know, districts that have the highest need will get the first priority. Well, we're not at the top of that list. We're not even in the middle of that list in terms of need. So when it comes to that, that's where I'm like, yeah, I thought about it, but in reality, the money that's out there is probably not going to help us at this moment in time because we're not a high need district. And we don't have, you know, 2010, 2011 buses sitting in our fleets that we could use as trade-in to upgrade to a new electric bus. So it goes back to is yes, we want it, and the governor touts that there's money, but not for districts like us at this moment in time. So it's figuring out how do we pay for a $350,000 bus if we need a fleet of 10.
How do we avoid the mandate is the question.
Yes, yeah. And I think, you know, and I think by 2027, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think it was like 20% of your fleet you have to be in that process. The other issue at this point is when we started looking at it is the buses out there had a range of about 70 miles. Welcome to the, right. I
All
mean,
impediments.
look around, right. You know, you're not going to Plattsburgh for a sports trip and getting back,
Super.
or you might get back type of deal. So,
I feel like that mandate got out ahead of the technology.
Yeah.
yes.
Like I could understand if there were just amazing electric options out there that were comparable in price and school districts were just dragging their feet because they like the smell of fumes. But that's not the situation.
At all.
Don't you think there'll be more options as far as financing them in the future, though, if that's the mandate? I mean, that'll probably change in time.
Hopefully,
well,
yes.
I would
When-
assume.
Financiers make it permissible for districts to do this and not be run out of town by their
Mhm.
electorate,
Yeah,
then I think we'll know.
You know, and one of the things that
Coming, it's just down the road, a ways,
Yeah.
that's all.
when I had that conversation today with the superintendent, and he was saying that, yes, you can create a restricted reserve account for busing. And so I started thinking, well, maybe that's like, if we truly have to go electric, a conversation is had at this level in the near future about setting aside some of our fund balance into a bus reserve for the sole purpose of purchasing an electric bus as we move through the mandates and we get to that point. Because, you know, we do have at this moment in time a decent fund balance, but at the same time, if it's truly a mandate where we have to do it, then we just have to look at how do we budget for it.
I'm assuming there's no lease options at this point.
I don't believe so, yes. Yeah, I can't imagine there won't be, because buses we're getting maybe next month from Bluebird, they do offer an electric bus option. It's very possible that that will also be, you know, a purchase or a lease. It doesn't really matter whether it's a gas, diesel, or now electric. It's something that we'll definitely explore for next year. Is this, because in reality, we have to start going down that road and start looking at it, and maybe we only, you know, purchase one bus next year instead of two, or at least
To get ready.
to get ready and, you know, start looking at increasing that fleet, even if it's 5 electric buses that we just used for around town type of deal. And those are our daily run buses, and sports buses are still using gas at this, you know, at that moment.
It would also be interesting to see how that's going to affect the municipal power agreement.
Well, yes,
Just like, oh, like, I don't know. Obviously, we're all just shooting in the dark here, because we don't know what would grant a district a stay of execution. To say, you know, and I feel like tripling the cost of power for everyone in the village and not being able to make it to the games that the teams need to make it to would qualify us for an exemption, but it'll be interesting
And
to see.
beyond that, I want to see how it's mandated. I want to talk to a lawyer who's an expert in this area. I'm just not going to accept that it's mandated. I'm not going to do that. So,
right, yeah.
We're
and
not there yet.
It was one
We're
of
glad
those,
we have you.
one of those elements that you typically see when the budget gets
I
passed.
got it.
Certain laws get embedded in there that the governor wanted, so it's sort of like, you let this go and you get this in your appropriations. It seems like, at least my 5 years sitting in this position, every year in the budget that gets approved, there are laws within, it's not just spending bills that they're
I got it.
approving. Yes, it's, oh, by the way,
Mm,
you're mandated now to start purchasing electric
And you
buses.
get to pay for it.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was the first term
You
that I
can't
was
raise the cap more than 2%.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for a wash of funds.
the first term that I learned when I joined the school board was unfunded
Really
mandate.
good.
Yes. They would say otherwise, if you're truly a needy district, yes, the funding is
Yeah,
out there. Like, I think Malone is looking at it. Well, they have 86% state. Yeah. Stammen has over 90% state aid. Malone has nearly 90% state aid. Most districts in the north end of our BOCES are north of 80% in terms of state aid. We're at 36, we're at the minimum. Yeah, if there wasn't a minimum, we would be lower than 36%.
You're right there.
Because when it comes to building projects and all that, or certain, like our BOCES capital project that we had to pay $1.5 million out of the district's pocket, that had no minimum. So we weren't getting any aid on the money that we paid to BOCES for them to upgrade their facilities. So there are certain elements that's in the minimum percentage of reimbursements doesn't apply, and we didn't get anything. So a couple of years ago, the district, we had a 3-year payment plan, if you will, for the BOCES project, and it was $1.5 million, almost $2 million that we paid out of our own funds. Whereas other districts, they were able to get aid on it because of their aid rate. So, any questions, other questions on the tax levy? We can spend a few minutes on the revenue if you want. That is a separate document, and I try to pull that out. In terms of how we, at this moment in time, are planning on paying for this $21.7 million budget. Karen has pulled it up. I have basically 2 documents, a spreadsheet and then a graph. As we've already talked about, the property tax is $17.1 million. That represents just about 80% of our revenue. The chart, shows it 79 and 79 point something, not quite 80%. We have the pilots. These are all lines that have been there before. Interest on taxes, tuition. You'll see that I've adjusted some because I look at how money's coming in this year. Are we actually getting to that? And if I don't think so, if we're not there, then I reduce it to kind of make it more true to life. You'll see that I've increased our interest earned on investments. Last month, we had already made $24,000 in interest. And at this point, and one thing good about higher interest rates, we are seeing a greater rate of return. So, that number could potentially be higher, but you don't know, in 6 months, if everything drops out and, they start dropping rates again. Don't envision it because we're still sitting at a 6% CPIU. I don't see the Feds changing their rates anytime soon. Refund for BOCES services, I decreased that a little bit. Basically what that happens is we pay for something and then in the end, once everything is all said and done and they calculate the true costs, they say, oh, here, and we don't get the money usually until October or November after that. And that's typically a little conservative in terms of what we end up getting. Miscellaneous revenue, that's just, if we have people that are renting our space and all that, kept that the same. Our gross state aid right now from the executive proposal from the governor, that was a 3% increase. So that's what that number represents. The BOCES aid, that comes from what the governor has proposed as well. In addition to the transportation, textbook, computer, library, that's all coming out of the governor's executive proposal. It's just a proposal at this moment in time, not until the budget gets approved, do these numbers become finalized. But what I did hear today from one of my counterparts that attended the legislative breakfast or meeting last week, he was told by our politicians, don't count on a budget being approved by April 1st. Okay.
Here we go again.
Basically, this is what, he was told, so I'm assuming anyone that went to the legislative breakfast last week up on the Hill heard the same thing from Dan Stack and Billy Jones is, for whatever reason, there's some squabbling going on in Albany and they're not predicting a budget being approved by April 1st. That it's probably best to go with these numbers and build off of this. And then if it goes up, that's great. But don't hold your breath come April 18th when you guys have to approve the budgets, that there's actually going to be a budget approved by Albany. That was at least what was shared last week. That could change between now and April. There's still time.
See if the bills need a new bar.
But absolutely.
I attended that meeting.
Yeah.
And the overall message was, don't get excited one way or the other.
Right. Yeah. Well,
The budget could go up, it could go down.
Yeah.
It's just,
my counterpart, he's been doing this for 20 plus years in this position. We were talking today and he's like, you're probably good with going with numbers here and building on, because the likelihood of it being significantly different than what has been proposed by the governor is very low. That these are pretty solid numbers to build off of.
So
Others-
I assume the appropriated fund balance increases to meet the tax cap. Is that when we did that?
The appropriate fund balance is to balance the budget.
Okay, right.
So in order to balance the budget at 21,730, looking to use $1 million in the appropriated fund balance.
Understood.
Yes. Right now, we have earmarked 669,000 in current year. I don't typically move that money until towards the end, wait and see in terms of once all of our revenues come in, once all of our expenses have come in, then determine, like 2 years ago, we had a line here as well, and we ended up with a $900,000 surplus. We didn't have to use the fund balance. So I don't, I wait until the end to find out once everything is come out, all of our revenue is in, it's been accounted for. Here's what our expenses are. Do we need to use appropriated fund balance to balance the books, if you will? But at this moment in time, in order to have a balanced budget, it's $1 million.
So what's our fund balance sitting at?
Sitting at a little over 5 million.
That's
Unassigned.
800,000 or something comical.
Yeah, 4%, right. It's like not quite 900,000 is what is mandated. I think when I looked at it yesterday, it's right off the financial statement that Telling Associates put together. It's a little over 5 million. 27% of our budget is fund balance. So it's there. It can be used. If we have to use $1 million, it's not. We're still in a good position financially. It's just if you do it over a period of years where you actually use $1 million, that will go away in 3 years, and then you just build the budget off of $1 million as a revenue source that is no longer there. But that's down the road, and knowing that and having conversations today about that, that's what you do. You build for the future. knowing what the future can bring. And then you make appropriate changes along the way and things like that, because things change. I mean, we thought we built a nice budget last year and all that, and conservative, and we ended up having a $900,000 surplus, a little more revenue, didn't expend it as much. But it wasn't because we were being frugal with the money. We weren't turning things down. It was just the way the expenses are. But right now, I'm not projecting that kind of surplus at the end of this year.
You were being frugal, you just weren't being miserly.
Yes. Questions on the revenue?
You can see federal aid there for revenue too. That's just us recouping the ARP funds.
Right.
That,
Using some of that as a revenue source. We did that in this year as well. September of 2024 is when really the ARP funding needs to be spent by. So in theory, if you did it, you probably could get one more cycle out of it, because the budget year begins July 1, and you could potentially, if you had and you did it right, have some money that you could then spend July and August of 2024 for the 24-25 budgets. But we're sitting at about what's left there is about $620,000 is what we have left in ARP funding.
Newbie question, ARP stands for,
American Rescue Plan,
okay,
federal money.
It's a COVID relief.
okay.
We ended up getting for the ARP, there was like 3 different cycles of federal money that we got. We had CARES, which was like 2 years ago. CRESA, CRSA, which was like last year, that was like 315,000. And then ARP, which was really the big stimulus that came out. We ended up getting a little over $700,000 for that. We've actually only, out of that $719,000, we've only expensed. We bought a lot of technology last year that we tapped into, some resources for our math RTI program in terms of resource materials have come out of that. We've only really have expensed about $85,000 of it, saving it for a rainy day.
when you say expense, you mean cash in the chit and
Well, yes.
seek reimbursement.
Yes, well, because any federal program, you get 20% upfront, and for us, that was like $71,000. So we've spent a little more than what we've already been received. At the end of this year, I will put in for reimbursement. Most likely, I will probably move money out of it to cover some salaries and benefits, because the majority of that money was built around salaries and benefits. $620,000 of that was earmarked for positions. The RTI math. Last year we had the permanent subs that we put under there as well.
2 nurses.
Yeah, 2 nurses we ended up getting. And I think we also initially talked about the social worker position was all that. We were fortunate enough where those positions were funded through our normal budget process, and we built them into the budget this year. We will recover that money, some of it this year and some of it next year, as we can.
Great. Any questions?
So just moving to the knowns and unknowns. You want to cover these briefly, Dana, too? Just when we know health insurance, we have a good idea what that increase is likely going to be now, right?
Yes. So when you look at this, we've already talked about the CPIU. That was about 6.5%. It was capped at 2. We talked about the growth factor that's in that. We talked about the executive budget proposal. That's still a question mark until they approve the budget, hopefully in April. ERS, that is the employee retirement system. So that is our CSEA employees. They fall under the ERS retirement system. That is sitting at 13.1% that we have to pay. The teachers retirement system, every year that changes. This year was 9.76. Last year was 10.29. It fluctuates depending on the markets. Yeah, and ERS typically, they have like 6 tiers in ERS, and each tier could potentially have a different rate. So this is kind of the average of it, because I think one of the, it's like up to 16% for one of the tiers, but then down to
Tier one,
8%.
maybe.
Yeah. So this is sort of like the average of how ERS, whereas TRS is one rate for everyone in that system. It doesn't matter if you are tier 1 or tier 6 in the teacher's retirement system. It's the same rate that you pay. ERS is different. Health insurance, that was a meeting I was at today, and that rate was set. So it's going to be a 3% increase in the premium. Last year it was 6%. So 3% is doable. If you look in the budget projection, I'm right around the 3% already. So I'm not going to, I don't envision seeing much of a difference in those lines because that's sort of where I was kind of projecting anyway. The tax cap, 2.77. Again, the buses are still a little unknown. There's going to be a little change there once we figure out exactly what we're going to be paying next year for buses. But if we're paying a little more, that means that cap will go up a little bit. But it's going to be a nominal difference, $10,000 to $15,000. We're not going to see a huge jump there. And the other unknowns are salaries for both LPA and CSEA, contract years. So, those hopefully will go smoothly and we'll know before the end of the school year what that will be. But we're going to have a budget to put together before ideally, it would be done before the end of April, but you never know. And we'll just budget accordingly and go with best guess scenarios.
So included in this first draft is the maintenance of covering school meals. So the executive proposal from Governor Hochul did not include any funding for universal meals for students, unfortunately. So budgeting initially $235,000 for that. So when you think about the potential of leveraging $1 million of our $5 million fund balance, a quarter of that effectively goes towards the maintenance of school meals by the district. Something that's novel regionally and across the state, but also immensely impactful, as you all know.
One thing there, though, I mean, that number, I've increased it from 215 in this year's budget, and I still don't think that will be enough to fully fund it. But doesn't mean we're not going to.
But that's not the difference in the budget between.
That's including the costs, the projected cost of, that's the projected
That's the
cost.
total cost of the
It's,
meal program.
Yes, and it's
It's the budgeted, what we were budgeting
budgeted
for
to
it,
cover.
but
But I just want to make sure that's not the difference in providing all the lunches and not providing lunches.
well, it is effectively.
yes.
Because
But it's not the difference between the two numbers, theoretical numbers. Or is it?
it's either the district covers that and all lunches are paid for, or we don't, and there's no line item in the budget for it.
A couple of years ago, you guys increased, so we had a standing budget line for transfer of about $90,000, and then we increased it to 215, and then projecting putting it in for 235. That 90,000, since I've been in this position, we were transferring about $25,000 to $30,000 to cover the remaining costs. That's pre-COVID. COVID came, all meals were reimbursed last year. Even with all meals being reimbursed from the state and federal, we still had to transfer about $25,000, and that was even with all meals they're not necessarily fully reimbursed. The USDA sets a reimbursement rate. It ends up being $3 to $4 depending on breakfast or lunch. So it's a decent rate, but it was still not covering all of our expenses. This year, the only reimbursements we're going to get are for free and reduced meals. So every month we submit to Child Nutrition how many of our students, free students, had meals, how many are reduced, and we get that reimbursement. We knew that a year ago when we talked about that. Saying 215 was what's there. Chances, I think I even said that we're probably going to see a $20,000 to $30,000 loss in addition to the $215,000. Well, expenses have gone up since then. So if I had to make a projection now to cover everything, it will be probably more like 50,000 above the 215 that we have budgeted. I guess the question you ask is, why am I not budgeting, say, 300,000 here? It's because, can we afford a 4% increase in our revenue, our budgets? You know, when you look at the BOCES line, that's going up 6%, and a good portion of that is because we have some high need students that are going out of districts. I can tell you that the budget line that we use to cover those high needs are still not at the level. We are budgeting 175,000 in this budget. The actual cost will be more like over 300,000. But can the budgets absorb that kind of increase? We find the money elsewhere. So you don't, if just because you're not budgeting in that line doesn't mean that there isn't some access in another line that you can then help offset it.
And you can still pull money from the ARP, can't you? American Rescue Plan?
We
Money.
can help offset in terms
Okay.
of other expenses, yes. And that's where you look at it at the end is, okay, maybe we're not spending all of our repair money in maintenance and custodial. And that, you know, is that, because in the end, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, here's what you expense, here's what you brought in. You know, some lines might have you expense more, and some lines you might not have expensed as much. It all gets rolled in, and you say, okay, here's what it is. Did we bring in more money than we spent?
No, I just
Yes,
specifically.
but you're right,
Towards
yes.
the school meals, if we wanted to continue that.
That's a good question that I found out there in terms of, can you use ARP funding for school meals? And I haven't seen a great answer as to, can you actually use it? Because the state and the federal government was very specific in terms of how ARP money could be allocated. What they did say is you can supplant. So we're using ARP funding for some staff and benefits. Well, by moving that money over, that means we're going to expense less in staffing and
Right.
benefits.
Yeah.
That could potentially offset an increase somewhere else.
So you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
Basically, within the budgets.
Right.
Within the budgets,
Yeah.
within the confines, and in the end, once you move money out of federal programs into your general appropriations, did you bring in more revenue than you expense? At the end of the day, if that's a yes, then it's a good budget.
How close are we to the 50% mark for students qualifying for free or reduced lunch?
We don't have the pulse on that, do we?
Well, actually, I looked at the number not too long ago and for free, because when you look at it for the community program, it's really just free, not free and reduced. And we were sitting in the low 30%, and you need 40 or more. And
A lot of people don't want to fill those out either, so that's
Exactly.
the big, there needs to be some kind of a carrot that we dangle. I've talked about this a couple of times
Yeah.
when Roger was here, that something to encourage these parents just to fill out the form, because we are missing out on reimbursement when we can't.
when they have, for this community plan, the way, what the state says anyway, is it has to be through direct certification. So direct certification means that families are receiving services through the county and stuff, that they get put on a list. And
Oh.
the school then pulls from that list to determine who is free and reduced eligible. Child nutrition says in order for you to qualify for the community plan, that 40% has to come from that direct certification, which means technically, I say technically, because I had a conversation today with my counterparts about this very thing. And some paper applications, if you look at it, and if they're connected to a family that's getting services, you could potentially use that paper application as part of the direct service.
Yeah, because it used to
Yes.
be back in the day that it was just a matter of getting the families to fill out the paperwork and not connecting it back to they're already in the system with DSS. So.
And I think even with our paper applications at this moment, we're still not at that percentage. When you look at direct cert and paper, and you think part of it is if every meal is free, what's the incentive for me to fill out a paper to get free and reduced lunch because it's already free? Even though it helps us, the district, for reimbursements, from their perspective, why does it matter? The meal is free no matter what.
And do we see a lot of students utilizing the program? Do we see
The meals,
the free meals?
yeah, absolutely. Dana, you,
Yeah, I think the last couple of years since we've had this, again, with COVID and then, it continued on last year, our numbers are up breakfast wise.
breakfast especially.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Excuse me, didn't we talk at one point, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we talked about maybe the community schools person helping with that, the paperwork? Did we talk about that?
I think we did.
Right? At one point, we talked about in some shape or form.
Yeah, she doesn't know you're sitting here, Keith.
Oh,
If you wanna harangue him
He's
directly.
in the
yeah,
shadow.
I think Keith needs a little more work. So, yeah, but there was some talk about the assistance with the community schools so that we could get that. I feel like that came up in the past few months. I don't know, but
we discussed was having someone trusted in the community,
Yeah.
and going door to door. But I had suggested that we leverage the census process because that takes place every decade, but now we gotta wait 7 years. So that's the last time that we went that route, and we did see an increase when we employed the census officer to simultaneously push the paperwork, but that ship has sailed.
okay.
Yeah, and I am gonna reach out once after the conversation I had today with someone about this, where they're linking it. Because Tupper Lake, they went to their food service director, it's a shared service out of the capital region, BOCES. And he was the one, Dan Bauer, Tupper was telling me that some paper applications, if they're linked to a specific family, could then be counted in terms of the direct cert. So I am going to explore that to see, we're using Savannah BOCES to work with Philip, our food service director. She's got years of experience, Julie Holbrook, and just to see, is there something there that we can explore with making that connection and then potentially seeing if we can get to that percentage.
That would be helpful.
Mhm.
Important enough that
Yes,
either way.
it's worth an exploration.
So the other priorities, like continuing professional development, ensuring we implement the strategic goals of the plan. Continuing on our 3rd year of our technology lifecycle plan. First 2 have gone very well. ESL, we know that is an expense that has not been budgeted for. So in recognition of the needs that have manifested over the course of the school year. The STREAM program, which really was created through an aggregation of our staff at the middle high school in recognition of the needs of our 9th and 10th grade students who may be on track for CTE program, ensuring that we have more project-based hands-on learning for those students so that they can get to 11th grade and continue to succeed in those placements. The Woods program, which is gearing up for its 2nd of 4 trips this season, but the first one was very well reviewed by the students. We feel it's having a great impact. And then the inclusion of 3 new buses and something novel for the district, 3 different sizes in an effort to have more flexibility and efficiency, but mostly flexibility in terms of who's permitted to drive a vehicle versus a specific driver as opposed to a staff member depending on the size of the vehicle. Is that a fair representation of the flexibility of the fleet,
Yes.
Dana?
Yeah, and that medium-sized bus, what we're looking at is that will also be a handicapped accessible bus. Currently, one of our large buses is actually, it's up for renewal this year, is the handicapped accessible bus. We thought that it was just, we need it. We don't have anyone currently utilizing it, but we still need it. So looking at the small version of it, so we can, have that. We have a small bus where a coach or someone, the ADK Woods or Stream, they could get in and drive it with kids in it because it seats less than 14. And that's the cutoff. Medium, we have it as well for, those, a little bigger. At the same time, if we have the need for handicap bus, we have it, and then replacing one of our large buses.
We've been very efficient with the fleet, particularly in recognition of the decision to unify our bus runs last year. So we've been able to reduce 2 runs. At that time, we reduced the driver position in addition to other positions last year. And future discussions about the reduction of the fleet are ongoing and yield real hope for the district. So continuing to be efficient in that area. And then just looking ahead, just the timeline. So just April 17th, petitions for board candidates, budget adoptions the 18th, the hearing. We have 2 scheduled, one in Wilmington and one in Placid, and then the budget vote itself on May 6th. Any questions?
Summertime.
I know.
Going forward, if you want anything different in terms of how the information for the budget, different. Anticipate one gives you everything. You can see it line by line if you want to study it.
Dan?
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody need to take a moment? Ready to proceed? Sure. Just giving everybody the option. Smoke them if you got them, or whatever they say. All right, so I will call this the regular meeting to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first.
Oh.
Try to move so fast that causes friction. All right, the first item is the consent agenda. Recommended action: approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda: 5A minutes, 6A teaching staff intermittent unpaid leave of absence, 6B teaching staff maternity leave request, 6C long-term teaching staff appointment, and 7B resolution for the disposal of personal property. Do I have a motion?
Yeah.
Thank you, Colleen. 1 second. Thank you, Jim. Any discussion, exclusions, changes? No? Just move it right under the table there. Okay, so parking, you guys want, and then maybe heated blankets?
Yeah.
For all the board.
Colleen, are you able to
Yeah,
vote?
I'm on, but it's not coming up.
Just hoping. All right, so how do you vote?
Yes.
So, while Keith is doing his thing, if you want to go out and go back in, maybe you're just not connected somehow.
I don't know what it is. Okay,
No
Yeah.
worries.
sorry.
You
Okay.
have 7 minutes.
Okay, great, thank
Same
you.
thing.
Okay, so that brings us to our first for the good of the cause section. Do we have any emails?
We do not.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add in this portion, Keith?
Is this my time?
No, you have time
Yeah.
later too. This is more like a freestyle section.
Good.
All right, thanks.
I got it.
And then we don't have anything in information public. We haven't had it, but recently. All right, so that brings us to presentations, and now you're up.
Do I sit here or do I? It'd be good if you could stand, Keith, and then I'll make sure that I feel like it's a locker room and just. That's not here.
Right, keep your best on. How about if I pull a chair out? Get a couple calls.
All right, you should be in the plane of view there.
Colleen is watching right behind you, Pete.
Okay.
Taking
I'm
notes.
watching you. I'm
Okay,
watching.
I can feel the heat.
Yeah,
Well, you're right here too. You're in front of me and behind me.
I'm all
You-
over the place.
You're all over the place. Thank you for having me. I guess it's been six months of the community school adventure for Lake Placid Central School District. When I sat in this same spot last spring and was interviewing with the administrative team, one point I made to them was, if you're looking for somebody that is strictly a grant writer, I'm probably not your person. But if you're looking for someone that can write grants, but also do a lot of programming and be able to kind of work with students as directly as possible, I think I'm your guy, possibly. So that was the pitch, and I think that's kind of how community schools have kind of played out here for the last 6 months. So for tonight's presentation, I just kind of put together what Tim and the administrative team and myself kind of put together at the beginning of the year, looking at other models as kind of, I guess, where we started the year is kind of our 4 pillars on the left, right? Things that kind of define a community school and things that we felt that we were looking for here at Lake Placid. And then on the right, I kind of put some examples, not certainly everything we've done, but some that came to my head at the time that I thought were worth highlighting and demonstrating how what program we put in place align with those goals. So first, fostering community engagement, making our physical buildings the hubs for the community. Probably the area that has, at this point, just because I think that takes time, been the least consistent of my pursuit at this point. But with that being said, I do feel like community school, we supplemented the open houses with a couple new layers to get people in here and to make people feel more welcome. And I think coming out of that, I think we have a lot of new ideas for next year, working with Sonia and Teresa. And then I think in March, it looks like by the end of this week, we'll be announcing some, I don't know if we want to call them adult education classes. Right now, we're going to call them community classes. But for adults, anyone in the district, and we have 3 kind of kicking things off as kind of our pilot: modern line dancing, painting, and a cooking class. The modern line dancing and painting will be at the elementary school, and the cooking class will be here in the high school or middle high school. Secondly, the expand and enrich learning time and opportunities, looking at programming after school, weekends, summer, possibly vacation programming, and enrichment. I think this is an area where we've done some pretty good work and established some programming that might last and sustain. At the beginning of the year, Tim was down at the elementary school and made the promise to the kids that the gym will be open out of school hours. And that was a moment of clarity that, okay, I have to make that happen. And we did that. We started that program November and December, in between the holidays of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we learned some things. There was some nights of great attendance, 13, 16 kids. And then there were a couple days that, only 2 or 3 kids showed up. So learning from that, we're going to do open gym again this March. March is kind of a time where, you're kind of transitioning from the winter to the spring, but the weather's still kind of crummy and, kids need activity. So we're going to get back to doing that for K through 5. Morning skates was a real big success. I didn't know if it would be, but we worked with Orta and the Olympic Center to have 2 dates where kids were able to skate before school. And we had 30 kids attend for both of those sessions. We're going to add that in March again. We're going to add 4 sessions, I believe, in March, and we're going to allow grades 3 through 5 to also participate.
And I think summer enrichment programs, it's more than being discussed. I think it's being conceptualized right now. And if we get the funding for that, I put in for a grant through the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and supported Tim, who wrote a grant through Generous Acts, hoping that we do get some funding to possibly run some summer enrichment programs. So if that funding comes through, then we'll start the process of trying to walk through and set that up for most likely August.
Keith,
Yeah.
do you envision what type of programming that might be?
Yeah, I've met with Sonia a few times. She did it pretty extensively at her old school. Like they offered like maybe like 50 different classes, week-long classes.
Okay.
It was mostly geared towards K through middle school. I think that's where we would gear it. Maybe some high school classes if teachers knew there was a need and were willing to take something on, but maybe try to offer those during the evening because those kids work.
Right.
But sometimes they work in the evening. So it might be, but we would gear it towards 6 through 8 to begin with. Maybe try to offer 20 different classes for 3 hours a day for 1 week, Monday through Friday. That would be the initial plan. But I can be convinced otherwise. That's kind of what's on the table now.
Are those classes for just students that are having difficulty in certain areas, or these other topics that are kind of fun for them, so to say, that they want to go do for 3 hours?
I think a lot of it would be problem solving, would be hands-on. It could possibly be to fill in some gaps, but that wouldn't be the ultimate goal. Like if I think of a teacher or a team identified that there was a group of students that could use some, filling in some holes, that's a possibility, but it would be more about getting kids engaged than it would be about, maybe doing something they wouldn't be interested in. It would be high, and it would allow teachers also to pick topics that maybe they studied in college or they do at camps, but it's not in their field of study during the year. So they would offer teachers, the opportunity to teach something that they don't teach in a classroom per
That's a
se.
great idea.
Yeah, so we'll see if it goes. We're hoping for it to happen. And then the third one is collaborate leadership and practices, work with K through 12 teachers, staff, administrators, and local partners to most effectively serve our students in all areas. I mean, I think we've done that a lot of different ways, but the glaring kind of example, because of the FISU games this year, was the MacPack program, which included all of those things. So I just kind of put down the MacPack program, which you're all probably familiar with to some degree, but by the numbers, just so you guys had a perspective of how many kids it served in our district and in St. Agnes. We had 164 students participate. There's our attendance broken down daily, which that was pretty encouraging to see that it maintained every day. We knew some kids would come one day and maybe not another, or they were gone. They were going out for the weekend and they weren't going to be there Friday. But the fact that the number stayed steady throughout the week was, I think, a good indicator that the kids were enjoying the program and they came back. 96 students attended all 4 days and 131 students attended 3 of the 4 days. And then there's a grade breakdown there of how many kids were signed up or participated in each grade. And you can see it's obviously a little heavier at the younger ages. When we got into 6, 7, and 8, the kids didn't sign up in higher numbers. But I will say those kids that did sign up in middle school came back. So I was a little worried, right? Because it has kind of the MacPack, it has kind of a younger appeal to it, I think. But to have the middle school kids come back day after day was, I think, was an indication that the staff did a great job and the programming was strong. So that's that. And then the last thing is integrating student supports, address out of school learning barriers. And, I think one thing about our district is that there's already a lot of people doing a lot of great things to support students in need. And for me, it's really learning about what people already do and sometimes just getting out of the way and not thinking I have to help because it's already being done. But other times supporting it when it needs to be supported. So that's kind of a learning process for me. But I think there's 3 things listed there that, I have been a part of. But most of them is assisting, different students that have needs so they can, have obstacles get out of their way and, go on field trips unencumbered, or find a job or volunteer at the FISU games long-term. So those are all kind of things that I've been part of as well. So that's kind of where we've been and where we're going a little bit. We got a heavy March coming up we're going to try to support the elementary school. They have a fun day or a play day, March 1, that they do a lot of outdoor activities. And I've been working with Sonia and a team down there to offer a layer to it where they can go on a local field trip if they want to, every class. So the teachers can choose if they want to do that. We'll be continuing, we'll start our adult education classes. We'll do open gym again. We'll do 4 skates. And there's 2 more things that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. But there's 4 more things going on in March. Oh, we got a college trip at the end of February. Connie Hamaker, myself, Mr. Gotham will be taking a group of sophomores and juniors to a Capital District full day college trip. And we'll be presenting that this week to the 10th and 11th graders to see who signs up. There's a couple other things in March. So, and then that'll lead us into spring break. And then if, like I said, if the funding goes through for summer enrichment, I think after spring break, the heavy lifting will be setting up that summer programming. So that's my presentation. Thank you again for having me.
Are thrilled, Keith, that you took on this role. I mean, you're only in your first year. And I can personally just speak for some of my own family members, the impact that you've had on our community, just with some of these programs that you've done. I know Torrin has participated in quite a few of them, but I've heard from many families during the MacPac week, most of the younger children, how impactful it was that their children had something to do that week, that they just weren't sitting at home in the living room or at grandma's house because they didn't have daycare or whatever. And I just can't wait to see how this evolves over time, because already there's just amazing things being done, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words.
Well said, well said.
Any questions for Keith about the program?
I just have a comment. I come from a theater background, Keith.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I gotta sign a waiver. We don't want another Rick Preston coming out of here.
I was gonna ask for a demonstration.
That's Vicky Kirchner's doing that. I don't teach any of this stuff.
I thought you,
Coordinate.
Keith, I had mentioned last time at a meeting that even though I'm far away, I have heard just wonderful things that you've done. So good job.
Thank you. And it's obviously like when you go through there's been so many people. I mean, I've been kind of figuring a lot of things out on my own, but when it comes to kind of putting stuff together, the principals, the secretary teams at both schools, the teachers have really, like, everything I've done has been totally started, and then something's been heavily scrapped in the middle of it because of someone else's good suggestion, and my stubbornness didn't get in the way, and then we made changes. So this is really, it is a team effort, even though it's, I'm kind of, I guess, the face of the community school. It really is a team effort, and I think the district has bought into it, and the teachers and the staff have as well. So it's, I'm only as good as the school community around me as well. So
Leadership. Well done.
thanks.
Any additional things for Keith to do? If anybody wants to add things.
I'm gonna go 7 a.m. I'm gonna start knocking on doors tomorrow with force. That's gonna go really well.
I'm sorry, that just was brought up before. Sorry, Keith.
That's okay.
I think of things that people should do,
Okay.
could do.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. That's good.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, Keith.
Do I leave now or do I stay? What do I do?
You got enough on your plate.
I'm out? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next section here is information for the board. You see several documents there. A letter from the library, running for school board. If you have any candidates, we'll have 3 positions open. We'll see if Doug wants to run again after,
I'm still on board.
still on board. Okay, good. So, we'll have two positions that will also need candidates running for.
Well, he still has to run and win.
Well, yes, but I mean, but in order to have, to fill the, we would have to have at least 3 candidates in order to fill the seats that we have. open.
Okay,
I'm still on board for running.
I love it.
There.
You still have your petition, right?
So you'll see all that stuff there. And then also some stuff in the executive content for to look up.
And I also added today that article on the community schools helping families with feeding and that NISBA calendar connection. You all probably got it as an email.
Yeah.
So it's just the link.
All right. Any questions or
Yes.
things that we can say outside of an executive session there? No? All right. Brings us to the superintendent's report.
Okay. So I want to start with good news. Always good to start with good news. So just connecting some dots and some correlations between debate, board action, and supporting students, because I think it's important to see the ripple effect of some of that. So earlier in the year, the board had a difficult decision to respond to market conditions about the rate of compensation for substitute teachers. I know that was a challenging decision, and some of the impetus for that, the need for that from my perspective, was that we were pulling staff at such an alarming rate to cover classes that we were not meeting the interventional needs of students who are on the bubble, particularly coming out of COVID. And our data coordinator, Amanda Blacksmith, who is a tremendous asset to the district, has mapped out some pretty compelling data that shows the correlation between the increase in that compensation and the increase in meeting the needs of students for their math and reading intervention. Prior to that, we were scrambling for subs, and so students would not receive the intervention they needed because the providers will be pulled to cover the classroom. So I have it here in my computer and up there, but just anecdotally, anything that is in green is bad. And that's where we were, okay? And there's almost no red on here, right? And basically, we've been able to cover things, which is great. But then the question is, okay, so we can now have intervention for our students. That's good. Is that going to yield fruit? So I'm extremely pleased to report that we have tremendous gains, particularly in math, as a result of our district focus on math, our inclusion of the RTI math position at the elementary school, and then the protection of those individuals providing that service by ensuring that substitutes can cover the load for them. So just very briefly, when we talk about where students are academically, they are separated into tiers. Tier 1 is a student who receives their education in the classroom with the teacher. Tier 2 is a student who needs additional support outside or in the classroom, but they're at least one grade level behind their classmates in math or reading. Tier 3 is a student who is 2 or more grade levels behind their classmates. So Tier 3 are students we're extremely concerned about. Could be a student with a 2nd grade reading ability in a 5th grade classroom, or similar correlations in math. So at the start of Q1, I'm just going to give you some numbers. In kindergarten, we had 7 students who were two levels or more below the proficiency level. Now that's down to 3. This is in mathematics. This is the really promising news. In grades 2, 3, and 4 at the start of the year, we had 2 students in each of those classes who were designated tier 3, 2 or more grade levels behind their classmates in math. We now have 0 students. So 0 students who are 2 grade levels or below their classmates in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 4th grade. Overall, the number of students who receive these additional services, we went from 19 tier 3 students at the start of the year. We're now down to 9. So the tremendous effect and an immediate impact for that. So there's a direct correlation between board policy and student achievement, and we're basically at the midway point of the year. So thank you for your support with that. Everyone's done a wonderful job with that. At the elementary school, there are plenty of things to celebrate as always. We recently had the band and chorus concert, which took place in the elementary gym. And I was just taken aback by the community response. It was my first elementary concert as superintendent. There hadn't been one due to COVID. And the capacity in the gym is at 500. And I was trying not to wear my administrative hat and just enjoy the concert, but it was teetering very close to capacity with the community participation. So Kathy Briggs did a fantastic job with our students, and it was extremely well attended. So kudos to our band and chorus students at the elementary school for their success there. Also on the musical front, I mentioned at our last meeting that Vicki Kirshner and Kathy Briggs worked with the EdUp Foundation to allow for some programming for students in music for enrichment. Last meeting, the Gibson Brothers attended on the 24th of this month. Animal Crackers Band is coming. We're all excited for that. And then in March, David Summerstein from NCPR is having a Latin music dance party with the kids. So great enrichment. We're super excited for that. Also in March, we're planning a Math Family Fun Night. This is where you can see a collaboration between our department leaders, which was initiated last year, and those leaders are doing a great job for us, and our community schools initiative. So in our conversations with our department leaders, we've referenced the data with regards to mathematics and our students and wanting to stem the tide at the elementary level. And so our math department partnered up with Keith and created a Math Family Fun Night on March 2nd, which is going to take place for our kids. So we're super excited about that. And we continue to have 4-H come and work in our 2nd grade classroom. They come in about 8 times throughout the year, with dates in February and March coming. So other good applications there. On the more district lens, our strategic plan continues to make strides in the formation of that plan, with the goal of having the board considering it for adoption to start next year. We have 3 task forces that have been generated to issue goals and action steps. The first one is the Academic Excellence Task Force. That'll be meeting February 21st and March 21st. The second is centered around innovation. District operating on an innovative course, and they're slated to meet on March 1st. And the last task force area is well-being, just ensuring that our students, staff, and community have well-being at the forefront of the things that they do. We're knee-deep in the future planning meeting process, and essentially, although the term future planning is redundant, it is a long-standing tradition in the district, and it's essentially when the administrative team has an opportunity to meet with each of the departments and discuss how the year is going, how the district can better support them, opportunities for growth, and then those conversations feed into the budget process. So our budget is in many ways a reflection of the needs and opportunities expressed by our departments. So it's a really strong hierarchy where staff have a voice in the resources needed to allow our students to excel. I want to shine a light in particular on some of the grant writing that's taken place recently in the district. In the past month, we've applied for a little over $200,000 worth of grants. In March, we're going to be working on formulating a grant closer to the $2 million range for community school involvement over a 3-year period. But on the technology front, Carissa Merrihew and Jason Leon who serve as our tech integrators, really spearheaded an effort to formulate an innovative technology grant for the district. And they applied through locally through the town of North Elba and the LEAF grant. And this grant is particularly novel because it's one of the first representations of a K through 12 vision in a particular area for the district, bridging the buildings and thinking if we have certain resources available to our students, how do we spiral that out over the course of their education so that we're building upon the successes over time. So we're hopeful for success with regards to that grant submission. And if it comes to fruition, we have additional robotics, coding, mobile technology, virtual reality, and AI tools that will be available for our students. So really excited about that. And that's really what we've been up to between the budgeting process, the future planning process, and strategic planning. We've been kept very busy, but lots of good things happening and continuing to happen.
Hey, Tim, do you think that your overview, you could include it so that we could kind of read along with you, or I don't know if that's too much, but.
No, that's fine. Yeah, just so you
You're
can
talking
refer back
about
to it.
that sheet that he was showing you.
No, I think, could be wrong, but I thought previously that in the superintendent report, maybe not with you, Tim, but it used to be written there so that we could read it or maybe go back to it later, like what your overview
Yeah.
is.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Let's go back to the grants for a second.
Yep.
Tim, are these federal or through the state? Where do they file these applications?
Great question. So most of the big ticket ones are federal. So they're with the Department of Education. So they posted recently, Secretary Cardona's office at the Department of Education. They posted the notice of intent period and language for two of the big ticket grants. The first is extending the school day grant essentially. And the second one is community schools, learning centers. So those are the two big ticket ones that we're going to be going after.
Do we have a relationship or contact with someone like Senator Schumer's office that we talk to and ask him to help with this sort of thing?
You know, we haven't done that. Most of the reach outs that I've done to date have been at the state level. But
Surprised with a phone call to do something.
I agree. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to reach out to Senators Gillibrand and Schumer, and
Yeah.
particularly when you have the majority leader of the United States Senate in your state.
Sometimes they'll bend over
Yeah.
backwards. They'll respond privately to a call like that.
Yeah.
Somebody with staff.
So, no, but that's a growth area and I'm happy to pick up the phone.
I'll poke around a little bit. And maybe after this meeting.
Great.
Any other questions for Tim? Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. Good to have some good news there. Especially the math department. I feel like we could talk about math scores since I came on.
I know, it's great. It's really
So it's
exciting.
good to see that. All right, so that brings us to 5A, which is in the minute or consent, as well as 6A, 6B, and 6C. Brings us down to additional action item 7A. Recommended action upon the recommendation of the superintendent approve the resolution below regarding the MACPAC program. I'll try to get through this as clearly as possible. Whereas the Lake Placid Central School District is a community school dedicated to providing a rich educational and social environment for students and families in concert with our community partners. Whereas the Lake Placid Central School District wishes to acknowledge the generosity and support of our community partners involved in the 2023 MACPAC program, who exemplify the district's vision statement of a school community that is united, engaged, and empowered. Whereas the MACPAC program provided world-class enrichment opportunities for 164 students residing in the village of Lake Placid, town of North Elba, and the town of Wilmington during the week of January 16th, 2023. Whereas the MAC program provided critical childcare services for families of the Lake Placid Central School District during the 2023 FISU World University Games. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby expresses its gratitude to the Lake Placid Public Library, Adirondack Sports Council, Town of North Elba, Village of Lake Placid, Cloud Splitter Foundation, Eline Ironman Sports Fund, Adirondack Community Church, North Elba Local Enhancement and Advancement Fund, generous acts at the Adirondack Foundation and the Olympic Regional Development Agency for their dedication to the students and families of the Lake Placid School District.
Good job.
A lot of whereases. And obviously, thank you for everything.
I'll make a motion to.
Oh, do we have to, yeah, we have to, yeah, sorry.
After all that.
Yeah, sorry, my head was spinning.
That's
all over
right.
words. Yeah, I just wanted to let the book land. You know.
I need point of information.
All right, Dan motion, can I have a second?
I'll second. Oh,
Doug beat you to it.
that's
All
okay.
right. Please
So we
vote.
change the word agency to authority.
Yes, that would be good
Yes.
to correct that. Yes.
Seven, yes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
7B was in consent agenda. Special education is information. That will be at our next board meeting. So please look up that. 21st. Linking goals with agenda items.
Keith's presentation, students first and foremost, community outreach. Budget presentation, what would that fall under? Finance or whatever it is.
Computer finance.
Yeah, finances. I'm still
I know.
reeling from that.
Yeah.
All right, please get any other additional ones to Karen. That brings us to our second for the good of the cause. Do you have any additional communications?
No.
All right. Adjournment phase of the meeting. You'll see our next three meetings. When will we know if that February 21st we'll have a budget work session? Just possible work session.
I guess it's up for the board to decide if Dana needs to bring anything back in 2 weeks. Or if things are still the same, then we
Yeah.
don't need to regurgitate.
Probably won't have any more numbers than we have now, so, okay.
So that will be no.
So that'll be a no, and then we'll probably definitely do the one on March 21st. All right. Any old agenda topics? Any new agenda topics?
I don't know if this is a new agenda topic, but this past weekend, the parking on Cummins Road was really bad. So the traffic control officer went to the chief of police, and the chief of police said that the road is actually handled by the school and ORDA. So suggested that the school send ORDA something that says, we need to get this under control.
Was it,
because
there was cars parked on?
both sides, they even parked in the sidewalk of school. It was really dangerous, like if an ambulance had to come up or something, there was no.
Road though, not
That is
village.
ridiculous that the chief of police said that.
I agree, so I just wonder if it's a new,
Yeah.
We do have a surveyor on staff. Of education too.
you know, and it says no
Public road
parking,
in the
but then
village,
it's,
like, West
some have
End,
hours on them, some don't, I mean,
That's
I
a
don't
village
know.
street though. That's-
I thought it was a village street.
They used to ticket cars
It's
on that
under
road.
their jurisdiction.
It is under jurisdiction of the town and the village. The
Yep.
town line is down by Cummings, or down by the shipment center, so. The shipment center sits in the town, this half is all in the village, so.
And the parking was where?
Oh,
In the
between
village.
It
In
was,
the
it was
village.
mostly from the youth center up. There was like, there was hardly
Right,
any
so
cars
it's
in
in the
the
village.
youth center.
In the village.
They were all,
Okay.
I mean, Catherine wrote 97 tickets. That's
Wow.
more than she did in like the last 3 months.
They come to the village.
Right.
Yeah,
And back here over the weekend?
What was that?
The
Colleen?
district
Oh,
parking.
and also
Yeah,
the
so the
sign
district
saying
parking.
one way was removed. Sign up here that went down the hill, wasn't that the big sign was removed that was not one way or do not enter or whatever?
That sandwich board hasn't been up.
Somebody had mentioned
Really
it.
changed.
Is that an
I mean,
agenda
that
item,
wasn't-
or do we just put that on? Tim's
I don't
to-do
know if
list?
that's something that we have to look into, what's exactly.
Let's put Keith on it.
So years ago, we approved for the police to write tickets on our school property.
Yes.
I don't know if they would have come up and written tickets for the people that were parked on our sidewalk. I mean, I don't.
They have the authority to do it. I don't know, I can't imagine.
It is a different chief of police from then till
Yes, yes.
now,
Who is it
so,
now?
It's Chuck Dobson.
but that should have been, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's something that the school should,
I'm happy to reach out to
Just
Chuck. He's
so I don't know if it's a new
been
agenda, I
a
just know that,
Fantastic partner for the
that it was
district. and
definitely a big
confident we
issue.
can-
Maybe we can just forward that letter that we approved 3-4 years ago, where we gave them permission to write tickets on school property. And
Or what if we just start writing tickets on school property? They can deputize us.
I'm mimeograph.
There goes.
Just.
We'll close that election gap.
Right, right, the fine.
Writing the tickets out.
The revenue source, there you go, Dana.
That's right.
$500.
put the toll gate at the bottom.
Yeah. If it's our road, that's right.
Yeah.
Put the toll
Your
gate
toll
in,
road.
no one can go through.
One small thing that I've noticed is that the no parking signs are hard to read. It sends the message to me as a car driver that nobody takes this seriously.
They were parked in front of the fire hydrant. Like, the
Yeah.
fire hydrant, everybody knows, you don't park in front of the
Right,
fire
right,
hydrant.
Mask pandemonium.
Yeah, okay. Well, Tim will look into that for us.
Yeah,
And then we still have an executive session here. So without further ado, I will move us into that section here. A motion to enter executive session for the purposes of discussing special education. And sorry, no, I was reading the wrong one. Motion to the recommended action, motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing the employment history of a particular person. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second over here.
Yeah.
Colleen one. Ron and then Colleen.
Vote. So
Get one.
Dan, you'll just need to make, motion of the, whoever makes the motion in time.
Okay.
So that's 7 yes.
Thank you, everyone.
See you.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good night.
Right.